Hi, my name is Michael Kaye. I'm a winemaker based in California. I'm co-owner of BK Wines. We make the Kaye Invei white wines as well as the Kuf red wines. This is our semi-sweet, the green label, and this is our dry, the red label. And was asked by Barth Thaler to put together a small workshop on how you can make wine yourself. It's really very, very simple. You're going to need some grapes, either red or green. You're going to need a container in which to put them and the juice that you're going to extract from them. So I suggest a pitcher because it's big and you can fit your hand in it, which you'll see will come in handy shortly. Or if you want to make something small, get something like a jar like this that you can close up, or that you can cover with saran wrap, which can also be helpful in this process. If you don't have saran wrap and you have a pitcher that has a top like this, that'll be very helpful. And you may like having a pair of dishwashing gloves because your hands won't get sticky. So let's just talk about wine for a second itself. We use wine to sanctify time. We use it to say Kiddush, the beginning of Shabbos, the beginning of Yom Tovs. And the interesting thing about using wine at that stage to transition and to transform from secular time into holy time is that wine itself is a transformed food. It's not an apple, it's not a pear. It's something that doesn't exist in nature, but through a transformative process, it becomes this other kind of special substance, which we call wine. And in addition to that, wine itself, not only being a transformed product or transformed food item, is also itself transformative. When we drink wine, we change. We become happier, more relaxed. We enjoy each other's company. We can sing. And so wine is not only a transformed substance, it's a transformative substance. And the interesting thing, if you think about it on Shabbos and Yom Tov, is you've got wine and bread, both of which are made with yeast. It's this sort of magical thing that's in the air that we can't really see, but that somehow transforms these basic foods into something very special. So special, in fact, that it sanctifies and changes the time in which we're in from something regular to something holy and special. So, what you're about to participate in is that process. Now, a lot of times in commercial wineries, they will add yeast, commercial grade yeast, to the grapes that they crush, because certain yeasts bring out certain characteristics of grapes. And in addition, certain yeast can be relied on to finish a fermentation with particular types of grapes. You don't have to worry about that with home winemaking. First of all, yeast is everywhere. It's in the air. Like the famous San Francisco sourdough bread, the yeast is just there and it gives it that particular flavor, that particular quality. And so with grapes that you can purchase at the store, you don't need to buy an additional yeast. There's already going to be yeast in the air. Now some people will say, well, what about this white stuff that I see on grapes? Is that the yeast? There may be some yeast there, but that's actually called bloom, and it's a protective wax that the fruit itself produces to protect it against bacteria and things like that. So you don't have to be afraid to wash it off. I, in fact, suggest that you do wash all your grapes before crushing them. You can see these I've already de-stemmed, but you can crush your grapes either with stems intact and then take the stems out, or you can de-stem it first and crush it this way. You can see here you've got the green grapes that have the stem. I already moved the stems from this, and I did a little bit of crushing earlier. I want to explain to you the difference between white and red wine. White wine comes from green grapes, or we call them white grapes in the industry. Red wine comes from red grapes. Okay, so that seems pretty obvious, but really how that affects the winemaking itself is that if you decide that you want to use red grapes and you want it to be a red wine, you're going to leave, after you crush the grapes in there, you're going to leave the grapes in there with the liquid. Why? Because they will impart their color from the skins into the juice. That's what makes red wine red wine. You could even take, some wineries do this, they take, it's called Blanc de Noir. That means white from black. So you can take red grapes, you can crush them and get rid of the skins and not let them soak in the juice, and you can actually get a white wine. With white wine, you're just going to crush the grapes, and then you're going to get rid of the skin, and you're just going to leave the juice. So what I would tell you is, if you decide you want to make white wine, you're going to need quite a healthy quantity of grapes, because unlike red wine, you can see here, there's already great material in there from the stuff I was crushing earlier, which will take up volume in the pitcher. With white wine, you're going to be taking those skins out, and so you're going to need more. What I would suggest to fill a pitcher like this of red grapes is about 4 pounds. For white grapes, you might need somewhere between 4 and 6 pounds, depending on the clusters and the type of grapes and how juicy they are. I got these grapes just from Whole Foods. I don't have any shares in the Whole Foods company, but people often ask, well, what kind of grapes should I get? Look, it's February. We're in the Northern Hemisphere. You're not going to be able to get the high quality grapes they get in Napa in the fall. Just go to your grocery store or have them delivered to your place, and just choose some grapes. Don't worry about the specialness of the grapes. The joy of what you're going to do is the process of making the wine and then being able to say a bracha, being able to say kiddush on your own wine. That is a special and sweet occasion, or dry, depending on your type of wine. So here's the process, very simple. I'm going to put on the dish gloves so that I don't get too sticky. Okay, put on another one here. Open this up. And I'm just going to taste some grapes. Get a handful of grapes, and I'm just going to crush them with my hands in here. You can see I'm just doing this like this, then I'm crushing them like this. And if you have like a potato masher or some kind of mashing device, it can really help things out, because then you can just put everything in here and you can plunge down, okay? So I'll take this and I'll keep doing this, and if I have the stems in there, sometimes actually leaving the stems in the grapes while you're crushing it makes it easier to crush, because the stems are hard and sharp, and so they make it easier for you to break the skin of the grapes. Some winemakers will even leave the stems in the juice, what we call the must, which is what I'm making now, because they believe it imparts a spicy, almost steak-like flavor. Other people say, or I would say the majority of people say, no, they don't do that because it imparts bitter flavors, which are not particularly fun to drink and make wine of. So, in any case, I'm going to do this, and you can see that as I'm crushing it, it's slowly filling up the pitcher. But what happens is when you've got your clusters of grapes, you'll see that as you crush it, it ends up being taking up a lot less space than when they're in whole clusters. So like I said, you want to get 4 to 6 pounds, and you crush it. If I was going to be doing the whites, I would just do the same thing. I would crush them here like that. So once you've crushed them, and you want to try to fill it up as high as you can, maybe not totally to the top. You want to have some space at the top for sure. But if you can fill it up, almost near the top, that's what you want to do. And then all you're going to do is you're going to take the top of the pitcher or some saran wrap, and if the top of the pitcher, you want to make sure that the slotted area is facing the spout. Put that there. And the reason you want to have the slotted areas facing the spout is what basically is going to happen is the natural yeast that's in the air, is going to start eating the sugar that's in the grape juice. and it's going to convert the sugar into two products, alcohol and CO2, carbon dioxide. The CO2 is going to expel from here, so you want to have some way for it to move out. The CO2 will also protect the juice from what's called oxidation, meaning exposure to oxygen. At this stage, you don't have to worry too much about there being oxygen above it. However, once the fermentation's done, you want to, as quickly as possible, get it into a sealed container where there's very little oxygen, if any, at the top, meaning like a used wine bottle, or a juice bottle, or a water bottle, or a jar, something like that. And if you're using red grapes, at that stage you're going to pour it through like a bit of a sieve or cheesecloth or something, so that it will take out the solid material and you'll just be left with the beautiful liquid. So you're probably wondering, well, what happens? I mean, does it just turn into wine overnight? No. The process is going to take about 2 to 3 weeks, generally. It may be faster, depending on where you are and the yeast in your air, but it takes about 2 to 3 weeks. And what's going to happen is slowly, you'll notice over a period of days, there's going to be little bubbles coming up. And that means that the yeast are giving off CO2. They're eating the sugar and they're giving off CO2. Think of the yeast as these happy, sort of drunks who are sort of, burping along and giving off air. So that fermentation will then continue to pick up. You'll find that it starts getting warmer around here because it also gives off heat. And it's going to be like an effervescence. It's going to be like, if you were to taste it, which you can, it will taste a little bit carbonated. You'll know that the wine is done when there are no longer any bubbles coming up, and you can taste it, and well, first of all, it will taste like wine, but also it won't have that effervescent bubble. If it does, you can continue to let it ferment, or you may just decide, you know what, it's fine as is. There's nothing wrong with drinking it. We call that champagne, okay? So another thing to note is that fermentation does well in warm weather. So 75 degrees is the ideal temperature. My wine ferments at 50, but if you're having trouble getting your fermentation started, put your pitcher, just sit it next to a radiator or put it in a windowsill where it can get some warmth during the day and just leave it there. You don't have to worry about it overheating, and it will slowly start to ferment. And eventually, you'll have wine, like my Kaye Invei wine. You pour yourself a nice glass, you say a bracha, you make kiddush maybe, you make l'chaim, and you'll see it brings a lot of joy. One thing to note, if you look on the Sefaria website and type in wine, you'll see that it appears in Jewish liturgy throughout the literature maybe more than 2,000 times. It's an essential part of who we are as Jews, and so I highly encourage you to take part in this beautiful labor of love and l'chaim.